dad knows he was a man of few words, and although I want to respect my father's communication style, it's not going to be easy to describe his life in just a few words. So Dad, maybe you should just grab a coffee and get comfortable, for this is going to be just a couple minutes. Like many people from large families, my dad had many names. As I look around, the people gathered here today will know him as Frank, Dickie, Dick, Doc, Dr. Tag, Uncle Dickie, Dad, and I think one of his favorite names, the most recent, Poppy. My father went to the University of Miami Medical School right out of the Navy in the early 1960s. After medical school, he moved his newly formed family of David, Gianna, and his then wife Sylvia to New Orleans, where he completed his internship and somehow found time to bring Andrea into the world. After he completed his internship, Dad brought his family back to Tampa, and in 1970 started a medical practice that spanned 40 years. With the addition of Frank, my younger brother, his family was completed, and he continued to pour his energy and soul into providing for his family and using his talent to treat and save patients' lives. About that, at 15 to 20 patients a day, that's approximately 100 patients a week, 5,200 patients a year. I know that includes holidays, but I can assure you that it was common for my dad to work weekends and holidays too. Dr. Tagliarini didn't retire until 2013. That means that after 43 years practice, my father affected the lives of nearly 250,000 people. This is not including many of us in this room who were lucky enough to be treated by Dr. Tag in the middle of his living room or on a Sunday afternoon or some other after-hours time and place. As I look around here, I'm pretty sure at some point almost everyone in this room has received health care of some sort or another from my dad. From my sister Gianna, who had her head sewn up in the middle of the dining room table, to any number of you who have come up to my father at a party or called in the evening or on a weekend and said, "Hey, Dickie, I got this thing growing on the back of my leg. Can you take a look at it?" He's been there for you. And I can tell you from growing up as a doctor's son and watching my dad in action, whether he was checking out that growth on the back of your leg or answering the phone in the middle of the night or in the middle of dinner or being called out in the middle of the night, that he was always happy to do it. I never heard him complain, not even once. He never showed resentment, never flinched, and most important, he never refused. He's always been there happily and with dedication for his parents, his colleagues, his family, and his friends. My dad was the real thing. He wasn't just a doctor or a physician. He was a healer. And he cared about your health as much as you do. In addition to having a loving family, my father was respected and admired by his colleagues. From 1975 to 1977, he served as chief of staff of University Community Hospital, and he was entered into an edition of Best Doctors in the Southeast, which is an honor he earned from the recommendations of his patients and colleagues. My dad loved to be on a boat, and he loved to fish. And the stories we could tell about my dad's experience on a boat and fishing would fill another entire evening. So I welcome you to share these stories with each other in just a little while as you socialize and remember my father. But for now, here are two of my favorite stories. On fishing. My dad loved to fish. And even though he didn't catch much, he did have his days. Many years ago, our family was vacationing with my cousin's family, the Sionis, on Indian Rocks Beach. We stayed at the La Regina Hotel, which was next to Pier Kahiki. They're both gone now. The best fishing was often right alongside the pier while standing in waist-deep water, getting as close as you could to the pier without getting snagged. So at this point, I really wish my Uncle Manuel Sione was here because he tells this story better than anyone. So, Tia, I'll do my best. So my Uncle Manuel was up at sunrise. He grabbed his tackle, dug up some sand fleas, and started fishing. As he tells it, there was nothing out there. He couldn't even get a nibble. I remember playing in the sand nearby with my cousins, 3 of which are here right now, and seeing him there all morning, casting out, reeling in, casting out, reeling in, digging up sand fleas, and then doing the whole thing over again. This went on for hours. Until at some point in the late morning, my dad wandered out onto the beach with a paper cup of coffee and a groggy look on his face. He watched my uncle for a couple of minutes and then said, "Catching anything?" My uncle reeled in his line and started walking towards my dad. "Doc," he's one that called him Doc, "I'm not catching nothing. See what you can do." At that point, he handed the rod and reel to my dad, and he handed the rod to and it still had a dead sand flea on it. From where I was standing, it looked like something had already taken a chunk out of that dead sand flea. So my dad was caught off guard, but eager to give it a try. He put the coffee cup in his mouth, between his teeth. He drew back and cast the line towards the pier. Almost immediately, I hear my dad yell, "Shit!" And he started reeling the rod in, and the coffee fell out of his mouth, and the rod was bending. I thought, okay, he's just snagged on the rocks. That's typical, yeah. But no, the rod was bending, and the reel was bending, and the rod was whizzing, and my dad had a fish. My Uncle Manuel heard my dad curse, and he turned around and shook his head and cursed something I didn't understand because I was young at that point. And he started running towards my dad because it was clear my dad had something big. My dad had already begun to reel the fish in, but it was a big one, and he was struggling. So my uncle helped him, and together they managed to bring in the biggest snook I've ever seen in my life. I'm sorry to say I don't remember how big that snook was, but I can tell you this. The snook that my dad caught after waking up at noon and using my uncle's rod and reel that had a dead sand flea on it was big enough to feed both families. On boating. As you know, Dad and Sheila have a small beach house on Little Gasparilla Island. And several years ago, my then partner Gary asked, "Why don't we ever go to visit your dad's island?" So I thought, all right, why not? So we made plans to go. We arrived at the marina, a couple of small bags, and waited for my dad to arrive. And very soon we saw his small boat approach the marina moving at what I thought was a pretty quick pace. As he got closer, he was waving to get our attention, and continuously closer he said, "I can't take the engine out of gear or it might cut off and I won't be able to start it again." Some of you have met my dad. "Get ready to throw your things on board." So my dad slowed down the engine as much as he dared and headed towards the slip where we were standing. On the first pass, we were only able to get our bags on board. It wasn't until the second pass around that we were able to jump on the board and get on ourselves. So finally, we were on our way towards the island. The topic of conversation was minimal and mostly had to do with the tide, which was low. My father concentrated on maintaining a speed sufficient to prevent the engine from dying and instructed us to keep our eyes open for shallow water. We made it more than halfway when I alerted my dad, "I see sand." Almost immediately we heard the unpleasant hiss of sand grating under the boat. "Get out and push!" before we get stuck. So I jumped out and somehow managed to ease the boat off the sandbar and then hoisted myself back into the boat before my father left me to drown in the middle of the The rest of the day was uneventful. Beach, food, family fun, all the things that make up a typical summer day. This was a day trip for us, so late in the afternoon we prepared to make the boat trip back to the marina. I said, "Dad, we're ready to go back." My dad looked in the sky and said, "We better get going, storm coming." So we gathered our belongings. My father grabbed a cheap plastic poncho and we went to the boat. Somehow my dad had started the boat in gear, and with a jerk we headed out into the intracoastal, this time with high tide. Like many Florida afternoon storms, this one picked up quickly, and within minutes of our departure, cold, biting rain was stinging our backs, the wind was coming in from the west, lightning was crashing all over, and the thunder was so loud we couldn't barely hear each other speak. My father had that cheap plastic poncho tied around his head, and somehow he managed to stay on track, and soon we could see the marina in sight. My dad yelled, "With this much wind, I won't be able to take you to the slip, but I can drop you off at the marina wall." I'm not making this up. He carefully slowed the engine and came alongside the marina wall. And again, we were able to get our bags off on the first pass, but we weren't able to leap to the wall ourselves into the second pass. As soon as I had landed, I turned around and yelled, "Thanks, Dad!" But my dad was already waving with his back to us. Couldn't stop the engine. And he's already gunned his engine, was headed back into the middle of the storm. Gary and I stood there and watched him disappear into the rain. And I said to Gary, "Malfunctioning boats, running aground, storms that appear out of nowhere. Congratulations, you've just experienced a microcosm of life with my dad and his boats. And that's why we never go to the island." Dad, I believe you're back in the universe now, a part of nature and a part of our lives in a more permanent and spiritual way, and your memory will live within us all. Dad, I know this was a bit long for your taste, but I hope you were able to sit through it. Oh. On the evening of the day my father passed away, there was a big storm. I don't know if you've noticed, there's been a storm every day since. As I was driving home to Madeira Beach, I looked in the sky and sunset, and I saw it was one of those spectacular sunsets with bright reds and oranges and pastels. And I immediately thought of something my father said to me on many occasions when I was on his boat. "Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky in morning, sailor take warning." Dad, that sunset was for you. As you passed into forever, the universe said, "Red sky at night, sailor's delight." My sister Andrea now is going to talk about some things we call poppyisms.
Thank you, David. So David practices his stuff. I don't. He's a teacher. He's a musician. I don't practice anything, so I'm not going to be as polished as him. And in fact, his is nice and typed, and mine's just not. Mine's taped and whatever. But I didn't want to have a maudlin, crying anything, because again, that's just not our dad. But I would like to share with you again what he said: poppyisms, things Dad has said, or what we think of when we think of him. So when we think of Poppy, Dr. Tag, Doc, or Daddy, we think of, for example, what I think it was my nephew, John David, where are you, that said, working in the yard, watching a nail go through his foot, and Poppy not even batting an eye. And John David saying, "Poppy, I think there's something wrong with your foot." And him just going, "It's okay." When we think of Dad, we think of coffee on his shirt, on his lab coat, on his car floor. Yes. The smell of his van, mixture, gasoline, coffee, cigarettes, and Great Danes. Olives and Pecorino Romano in our Christmas stockings. Because he knew, I had Cheetos one year, because he knew that was my favorite. Us complaining about writing poems on Christmas Eve to get those Pecorino Romano and olives in our stocking. We have a tradition that the kids have to write poems. They don't like it very much, but they do it, and Poppy loves it. Dad loves it. When we think of him, we think of Christmas Eves with him. That's been a tradition for many years, and it's cherished. We all love it. We think of jam sessions that he had with David, playing his clarinet, his guitar, or the keyboard, or just playing on the keyboard, not really playing any songs, just kind of diddling around. When I think of him, I think of walking to University Community Hospital with him for lunch when I was 11 years old and wearing his lab coat because I was cold in the office. And I just felt so proud wearing my father's lab coat into the hospital because everybody knew who he was. They're like, "You're Dr. Tagg's daughter." Well, it had his name right here. So that helped, and he was right next to me, but I was so proud. That's just something I think of. As an adult, when I was his office manager, I remember doing that same walk to UCH, not usually wearing his lab coat, but listening to him brag to his coworkers about my brother's musical ability. There was just, I don't know why, it just happened to be 2 or 3 times. They were introducing me. This is my daughter. You have other kids. Oh, and your brother David, that's a musician, right? We heard about him. You talk about him. We think about, my boyfriend Bob thinks about bailing water out of the boat at Gasparilla Island next to the dock as it's literally sinking halfway in the water. That was our ride home, so we spent hours just bailing. I think of knowing that he failed chemistry, I think twice, and still became a doctor. There's hope for everyone. We camped a lot with Dad when we were younger. Getting to the campsite in a 240Z with Gianna on Sheila's lap, me and Frank in the back of the 240Z with camping gear back there, some of it in the back, some of it on the roof, but that's how we got there for quite a few years. And then when we got there, just getting ready to put the tent up, his back going out. But I understand now what it means to have a bad back. So I can definitely sympathize with him, and I understand it a lot better than I did when I was 12 and he wasn't around. I remember driving in that car but getting sick because, Dad really didn't pay a lot of attention about staying in between those lines in a car or a boat, and he had to always correct to get back and forth. And I remember having motion sickness, and I couldn't figure out why I was sick all the time. That was why. We talked about his Great Danes. I mean, we know he's had so many dogs. He loves animals, and he had Great Danes. And when I went to Iraq, he took care of my dog, Rascal. He took care of him so well that Rascal pretty much became his dog. And when I came back, he did stay with my dad until Rascal passed away. But he was such a wonderful granddaddy to puppies. When I think of my dad also, when he was younger, I think of him cutting off his little brother's toe with a bike spoke.
No JoJo.
That's right. I think of him when you ask him, "What are you doing today?" "Oh, just piddling around in the yard, piddling around in the garage, piddling around on the boat." But that's what he said, "I'm just piddling." And that's pretty much what he was. One very, very close member of my family said when she thinks of him as a wise old man of few words. But when he speaks, it's very much worth listening to. Some of the things he has said on how to dress. Don't let your bra strap show because only sluts do that.
It's true. So
On
true.
how to talk. Don't ever say the word like. It makes you sound stupid. Right. On sharing. Don't make popcorn in the office. It stinks. Everybody will know you're making it. On education. How am I supposed to talk to you if you don't know anything? Go to school. On teaching how to simply enjoy one's company, or maybe he just wanted quiet. Shh, do you hear that? Silence. He also said you can drink coffee anywhere, anytime, which is why it was on everything he owned. Also heard, during his piddling around, right damn tool for the right damn job. Then throwing the tool because it's probably the wrong one that he grabbed in the first place. Another member says, when he thinks of him, he just thinks of him simply calling me Carabella. No other name. On weddings, saying to me twice, and Gianna once, while waiting to walk us down the aisle, you can always change your mind. Also on camping, Gianna told me, turn off all the lights, let your eyes adjust. That's your best tool, your best weapon. A very close friend of ours on weight. You're not in high school anymore. You're not swimming it off. You can't eat 10 Oreos and a Big Mac. And then handing a gift for her birthday, a Fit for Life book. Doc, are you saying I'm fat? Nope, I'm just saying you need to lose weight. Same friend, same medical doctor. He had to put stitches in my butt. And he asked, "Are you more comfortable standing or laying on the table?" "I'll just stand." "Well, drop your drawers. Let's see what we got." There are those here that respected him a lot as a doctor, but couldn't bring themselves to go see him because they didn't want him to see them naked.
We know who this is.
And I'll finish this off with the standards that pretty much anybody who knows him or spent any time with him can remember what he said. Stop coughing. Get off the phone. Hey, little girl. Or hey, babe. And the two, actually three, biggest ones. Stop chewing gum. Quit chewing ice. And please pass the salt. Actually, not usually saying please. Thank you. David's going to play. Actually, I'll let you explain what you're going to play. You definitely know it better.
Well, of course, you know that my dad was a big musician. He played clarinet and saxophone, high school, elementary school, college. He was a big jazz musician. He's a better jazz musician than I was. And, he was a really great clarinet player. So I'm just going to play something, and I hope you'll try to imagine. Should I put on this hat?
Of course.
Try to imagine my dad. He's probably got a cigarette. One eye closed. Somehow managed to play the clarinet, got a cigarette in his mouth at the same time. And hope you enjoy it. Might be loud for you. Or it might not play at all. Okay. Did you get it? You're bound to find love up on Sugar Hill, where everyone's having a southern ball. You got a straight to enter till you take this number. 145th Street, where all the cats meet. Now you found a jive, man, you're really in there. Ba-ba-doo-da, ba-ba-doo-day. That's the riff that the bands all play. It's groovy, the head cats sing, and you know that you're in Harlem. You got to get on that A train, and you will have a ball. Yeah, if you're looking for rhythm, you'll find it on Sugar Hill.